A beautiful day, blue sky, sunshine.
All the new 1980s hits and set.
Exciting play-by-play action. We got.
You know, when Carl asked me to do this, well, I twisted my arm, I think it's actually right. And I started thinking, it's kind of scary because I started at age 17 in 1966 at KIHR as a high school senior, and that's a lot of years ago.
I don't think we're hearing the mic.
Oh, not hearing the mic? Okay. Whoopsie. Hello, test? Testing 1, 2. All right, this is fun. Getting anything now?
Yeah, that's
Okay. All right. Well, it has been a lot of years in radio. Actually, I'm going to read this, okay? And there's a lot of radio out there these days. You probably won't recognize all of them because there's a whole lot of them that some of them even have come and gone. Some stations I discovered in researching this talk I didn't even know about. So that's how much radio has changed. Let's see, along the way, well, I just let you know my background is I worked at KIHR. I worked about 12 and a half years at KODL, as I like to call it, an eighth of a century. And I worked a year as a morning disc jockey on Y102 while working at the Chronicle. That was interesting. I've been a weekend disc jockey, morning disc jockey, afternoon disc jockey. I have been a talk show host, a newsman, an ad salesman, an ad manager, station manager, and even owned a part of one of the stations I was at for a while. And then I got smart and moved over to the radio instead of the newspaper. But I keep my hands in it every once in a while. I still do a show. I sit in for Dan Ross's singer-songwriters on Sunday 2 or 3 times a year and have a great time spinning the records, as it were. So what I hope to do today is give a brief overview of the history of Wasco, Columbia River, and Klickitat counties as far as radio goes. Also, some behind-the-scenes stories that have never been heard before in public. And I think the statute of limitations has run out on most of them by now. And now, leave plenty of time for questions and answers because there's a lot of stuff to know about radio. If you didn't get a handout, I've got some up there. There's so much detailed information that I could bog you down with dates and numbers and times and frequencies and all that stuff, so I thought I'd just put it on paper and we'll just mostly tell stories here. One quick bit of information, one tiny technical bit. Sometimes I talk about kilohertz and sometimes I talk about megahertz. The difference, hertz means cycles per second. Radio waves travel so many cycles per second. Kilohertz is thousands of cycles. Megahertz is millions of cycles. Kilohertz is what stations on the AM band are defined in, and that's from 550 to 1700 kilohertz. FM band is 88 to 108 megahertz. All you need to know. Oh, and the other piece is AM radio travels a lot farther with lower quality. FM radio travels a lot shorter with much higher quality. All right, that's the technical stuff. What really surprised me, and I have been, as I say, kind of an amateur radio historian for a long time here, I always thought radio in the gorge began with KODL in 1940. Not so. And I discovered this just Thursday night. I happened to sign on to Portland has a really active radio internet forum. And I finally joined up with it. And I said, hey, anybody got any good stories? I happen to be doing a lecture on Saturday. And one guy said back, said, yeah, did you know there were 2 stations in Hood River way before there was a station in the Dalles? And I said, no, tell me about them. So we're going to find out about them just a little bit. One of them, got my handy laser pointer here. I can figure out which way to point it. See right up there, there's a funny looking stamp. And it says KQP on the stamp. Now, in the 30s, radio stations, or even in the 20s, radio stations would sometimes send out confirmation stamps to people who had what they call DX, their distance listen. See how many different stations you can pick up by listening all night to the Captain's radio and tuning it by hand and whatnot. And this is the only piece I've ever been able to find from the river radio station KQP, which started in, let's see, flip the page here. It was owned by Diamond Electric Company, and some of this information is here on there. It was started in studios at 308 Cascade Avenue in the river, and then KQP was on an odd frequency, but they originally put them in meters, and so it was at 832 kilocycles, way down the low end of the AM band today. And then it got moved to Portland and eventually became KOIN. So there's a history there. The second station, let's see, was KFHB, and I've just made up a logo for it, just because I wanted something to fill that spot. And that's the 20s style lettering that they might have used. And it was owned by P.J. Beardswell, owner of the Rialto Theater. Now, Rialto Theater lasted into my time, because as a kid I can remember going down and watching. They really had the double matinees, 2 movies, half a dozen cartoons, and actually old movie serials from the 40s that they recycled into the 60s. Had a great time. It also got us out from underneath for hours and hours on a Saturday. Anyway, it was only on the air less than a year. Let's see, from 1923 to 1924. Then there's a long space. Then we get to a story. It's where Sandy Visit, bless her heart, emailed me this story just the other day. She said, "Did you know that the Dalles almost had a radio station 4 years earlier?" No. Here's where to find it. Here are the specific dates in the Dalles Chronicle. Go look it up. So I did. Yes. This is amazing to have all you people in it. And Sandy saved my bacon before. Not only that, but she brought the computer at the last minute here, so we both heard it. In fact, it was just right through there in the Chamber of Commerce building that they had a hearing in 1936. A group of investors from Spokane proposed putting a station here in the Dalles on 1,200 kilocycles. And a bunch of guys from the Oregonian came up and said, "No, we don't want that." And that's because the Oregonian, we need to do a couple of things here. First of all, there's a closer view of the KQP. And this one I have to show you when it became KOIN. That is one of my favorite letterheads of all time. It says, "The Journal, Studios and Offices, New Heathman Hotel, Portland, Oregon." And what's really cute is how the CBS forms the decoration on the base of the microphone stand. That's what the reason, getting back to my story, the reason that the Oregonian people were protesting is because they owned the station KEX on 1180. 1180 is only 20 kilocycles away from 1200, and they said, if you put that station on, the people here locally won't be able to get KEX. And it happened. They didn't ever make those stations. But this is interesting too, that note that KGW and KDX, two of the biggest, earliest, most powerful stations in Portland, were owned at one time by the Oregonian. The Oregon Journal owned KOIN, Oregon's independent newspaper. And I believe they owned another station too. Well, in later years, rules changed and newspapers were no longer allowed to own radio stations. So I'm not sure if that's a good thing or bad. So radio did really begin in terms of long-term, full-standing commercial stations in 1940 in the Dalles with KODL. A fellow named Barney Kenworthy, who had been a businessman. He was born in Indiana in 1895, came to Salem in 1906, later became a businessman in Portland, was a banker, a salesman, a businessman, and he decided he wanted to get into radio. So we put on, there they are putting up the tower used to be on Scenic Drive next to what was called Radio Way. It still is, I guess. Let's say. And they did it, I have been told later, that they did it by building it up and then putting a bunch of guy wiring and jacking it up underneath and putting another section. Jacking, which sounds like a horrible, dangerous way to do that, but it was 200 feet tall, so. And this is what they built it as a building, just as homes, so it could sell it in case the radio station didn't go. They'd have something to call that. Now, years later, Paul Walden told me, he was, by the way, he was the engineer that did the initial construction of putting KODL in the air. And then later, he went on to build stations in Pendleton and Casco for the same Barney Kenwood, and then came back and was manager here for 20 years. He told me later, when they put that up, it was at the end of the road, and it had been kind of a lover's lane, and the people there were not happy. This new building with a big light on it, and there's a giant tower where now they're going to old lover's lane. This is the inside look, and I'm sorry about the quality of these photos, but they were scanned out of the newspaper. Inlaid in the linoleum tile is a couple of notes and a sign, and there was a grand piano in the corner. In that control room, you could look out. The operator sat in there, and the operating board was this way, and he could look out and see and give the musical cues and whatnot to the people. And by the way, I'm sure you all know who one of the earliest performers was there in that radio station. A fellow named Carl Severinsen from Arlington, young trumpet player, played his first professional broadcast gig in that building, and I believe it was 1947. So he later went on to fame and fortune as Doc Severinsen on the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. Here is a meeting that's labeled the Airport Board. Apparently they conducted a session, or they all wanted to sing, I'm not sure what. But it's pretty bad. Here's Paul Walden is the fellow seated there, and I'm sure many of you may remember him fondly, a real gentleman. And I believe that's Bert G.
Right.
And I'm not sure who the gentleman is on the left, if anybody knows that. But then the label says that they're reporting an election, probably about 1956. There. Uh-oh. 1966, I started. This is from 1968. Oh my gosh, look at that dark hair. Look at that skinny guy. A couple of things I'll show you. It may not show up that well. That was a big, we call it the copy bin. That was full of file folders slid back and forth with ads written on them for you pull it out. You'd be talking and you reach in and while you're talking, you pull out. And Keir's Jewelers is going to have a sale on etc. etc. It was Keir's Drugstore. Or Columbia Photo Supply, or some of the other ads at the time. The turntables were much larger. They would accept a 16-inch record, which is the way that things used to come. Programs that we buy would come on transcribed onto these long playing records. Up there is one of the earliest card machines. I'm going to walk over here for a second. Carl, can you hand me that cart there? That's that thing right there. These are fun. You just got to be careful not to go to anybody's. This was top new audio technology in 1966. This is a 4-track tape card. It's an endless loop. Comes out of the inside and goes around and back. And this one is 70 seconds long. You plug it in to that machine, and a capstan comes up in here and plays an ordinary audio tape for 60 seconds, and then you go do something else. And then when you're doing something else, it rewrites at the beginning, 10 seconds later it stops. And you'll see a whole rack of them up there. And that's where you had produced commercials that had music in them, or jingles, or multiple voices of people who weren't there in the control room at the time, or whatever. So that that was the way it used to be. I'll skip ahead here. Ah, yeah. Look at that dark, long hair. 1976, the brand new Fort Dalles radiograms over there, the Martin Maria, and at that time they donated, broadcasting in a FM transceiver, little FM two-way, right there, portable with an antenna, in my fancy Cadillac. And that's about as fancy as I got. That, by the way, is a dangerous post. If you look down there, you can see stuff rattling. The very first time I went to a rodeo, which had been 2 years earlier, in 1974, saw the old Fort Dalles rodeo grounds, Fort Dalles Riders grounds, and it's the flimsiest construction you ever saw. One of about 2 stories. I've never even seen a rodeo. And Alan hands me a microphone and says, "Here, you take it for a while." Okay. There's the horse. Oh, he's off. I got really good at that after a while, but that was the way that rodeo broadcasting happened a lot. Celebrities came to town. This is at Ray Shelton's Ford. Note the white belt. And the wide tie. 1977. I've got a little transistor radio in my pocket so I can hear myself to make sure when they give me a cue to say, "Okay, take it away." I'm doing that. That fella is Burt Ward, who played Robin in television's Batman. Huh? That's, yeah, you can see that. By that time, by 1977, the hit TV show was long behind, and he was reduced to making personal appearances at car dealerships in the Dalles area. He was kind of a snot, so. Inside stuff here. This guy, this is at the Eclipse in Goldendale Observatory. This guy was called the Rainbow Man, and his fuzz was dyed in stripes of different colors. His whole gig was, and he worked with people, fundamentalist groups would support him, and he would go into every kind of sporting situation, news situation. He would carry a big sign that read John 3:16. And his whole thing was, being famous, was beginning on television. He would sit behind the goalposts at the Super Bowl, and somehow people would arrange things for him. And so there he was, being interviewed at the Eclipse. Celebrities. 1981 at the National Association of Broadcasters Convention in Las Vegas. Note the silly grin on me. Mr. Clark, by the way, is a thorough gentleman. Up close and personal, has little tiny wrinkles all over. Back then.
But how old is he now, Big Clark?
I believe he's in his 80s.
And he's had a stroke, and he's still in New York.
Still in New York, still did the thing. Sounded a little shaky this last time.
And I listen to him every Saturday morning on radio.
Oh yeah, Big Clark. American Bandstand, Philadelphia. Everybody had their favorite dancers. This is 1983, doing the coffee break show at the, one of the main, it was out of the Shiloh Inn at that time, with all of the gear. The microphone was done by a phone line, hooked up. And most recently, this was last year, sitting in for Dan Ross at KC. The KC Corner, which is no longer there, because the KC AM and FM and KMSW moved to the old Q104 quarters. Oh, anyway, that's that. I wanted to do that. So, brief technical explanation. AM radio goes out and bounces off that yellow band. You probably haven't noticed in the sky because I colored it just for you. Called the ionosphere, or more specifically the heavy side layer of the ionosphere. Signal comes up, bounces, and comes down. At nighttime, that layer, which is pushed closer to the Earth during the day by the solar wind, goes out farther. And the signals bounce off that and go farther. But this is in AM. And, well, that's why some stations,
Fake.
some stations interfere with other stations. And in order so that the skywaves aren't crowded at night, everybody's territory is cut back. They either reduce power, they go off the air altogether, they aim their signal directionally. But FMs are tighter, stronger signals. They punch right on through and keep on going. So, which is why FM signals are all line of sight. In order to get an FM station, you have to be able to see the tower, and the higher up they are, the bigger they can cover, area they can cover. I'm just going to show you that. Sometimes the coverage maps are not exactly straightforward, having to do with the contours of the land. Okay, that's the audio-visual portion of it. I'm not sure how to turn this thing on. Now for the stories. I showed you there shortly after. Here's one of the things that actually happened to me. It is the disc jockey's nightmare. Shortly after I decided to get back into radio, and it was I made the mistake of telling my father that I would love to work anywhere in Oregon except the Dalles. The only station that offered me a job was KODL. It was then KGLX, the Golden X, briefly. And I was moved in with my wife to my old house, staying with my parents until we could find a spot. And I woke up one Sunday morning, supposed to have signed the station on at 7. It's 7:02. I'm in the river. The station is in the Dalles. So I'm thinking, well, there goes that job. So I throw on my clothes, I hop in my car, I'm checking for cops speeding down the freeway. I get to the Dalles, I'm thinking, they're going to stand there at the door and say, here's your license. Nobody's there. I may have a chance. Run in and I turn the transmitter, warm it up real quick. I get a record on the turntable, I put it in the middle of the record. I turn the transmitter on, I open the microphone, and I back announce 3 records. It was my crowning glory. Nobody caught me at it. Everybody on a Sunday morning was either sleeping in or tuned to someplace else. That's which is, I think the statute of limitations is passed on. Which is another good story is how I got my job in the first place, way back when at KIHR. I got it because I took a lot of speech and drama. I was president of the Thespians, and when I was standing in line to register for my senior year at Y East High School, Chuck Lowe, the principal, came over to me and said, you know, the guy who owns a radio station is looking for somebody to train to be a disc jockey. Would you like to do that? And I indicated that would be good. I think my exact words were, who do I have to kill? And I went in, I had an interview with him, and Matt McCready was the fellow that owned the station at the time. He was a total gentleman. He had gone to my father to ask if it was okay if he didn't think it was going to not interfere with my schoolwork or my social life, such as it was. And apparently received assurances, and so I started training. And I would come in and I would work a little bit, and then spring break of 1967, this is just like 3 or 4 months after I started training, I get this call early in the morning. And I say, what? In this whispered voice, it says, this is Becky down at the station. Can you come in and don't say anything to anybody? Okay, I can do that. So I go down there, and what had happened was the disc jockey the night before had got drunk on the air. And nobody had noticed. Or at least nobody who worked for the radio station. And in those days, we had to take measurements on a log every hour. You had to go right down the plate current, the plate voltage, and about 4 measurements. What the frequency was, were you drifting this way or that way. And in those days, that station signed off at 11 o'clock. And I saw the log later. He'd signed it off And they said, can you take his job? And I said, okay. And so for the rest of my school year, my senior year, I would get off school, I'd grab something, I would go down there, and I would be on the air from 5:30 to 11 o'clock, studying and getting records, and then go home. And on Sundays, I'd work 8 hours. So I want to say a little bit about KIHR at that time, because it was a real anomaly in radio, even in that late era at 66. It was a station that had something for everybody. It played as a default setting, middle-of-the-road music, Andy Williams, Tijuana Brass, Monty, that sort of thing. But specialty programs, oh, they got them all. There was a polka hour on Friday night. There was a country music program on Saturday afternoon. Every afternoon, Monday through Friday, there was something called the Fun Hour, which ran from 3:10 to 4 o'clock. There was old kiddie records for the kids coming home after school to keep out of mom's way. They would play Tuggy the Tuba, old Lone Ranger adventures, a couple of Buzz Corey, Space Commander, like that. It was great. There was a Monday night rock and roll show for the teenagers, and there were a Sunday night classical music program, and every weeknight from 6 to 7, 1 hour of dinner music. All instrumental, so you can have something nice to eat dinner with. Monty, 101 strands.
Why don't they do that now?
It doesn't fit. The answer to why don't they do that is money, almost always. Anyway, it was a fascinating place to work and learn about lots of different kinds of music, particularly the classical music, which I did not have a lot of background in. This is by Mussorgsky. And I just say, look, I don't know it. I'll read off the back of the albums here, and we'll give you the information, and we'll play. It's like actually kind of fun. Geez, some of the stories I can do. DXers. I'm just going to bounce around here and tell a couple of stories, and then we'll close it up and ask for questions. DXers are people who are insanely devoted, picking up however many stations they can, to the point where there's a group in Finland that have a club down in the south that goes for a month to the north end of Finland, where they have a mile-long antenna and spend hours moving the giant dial just a fraction to pick up those little crackling things. And I found out about that because I got this letter in the mail from Finland at KODL. And it had a card with a piece of tape wrapped around it. And I wrapped the tape onto a reel and I played it, and it was KODL, and it's heard in Finland. And so I said, yeah, we'll send you confirmation of that, that's cool. And the guy sent me back all that stuff you see on the table to the left. Those are all stickers and patches and keychains from Radio Sweden and Touring Radio and Radio Hong Kong. And we listen all the time, all different frequencies. And he said, I get this extra stuff. Would you like it? So I thought I would share it with you guys. I have to say a little bit about Les Cunningham. And a couple of the key events in radio history, and one of the key events was in 1967, when Barney Kenworthy, the guy that put KODL on the air, sold the station not to Paul Walden, who managed it for him for 20 years, but an organization called Sterling Recreation Organization out of Seattle. They owned movie theaters and bowling alleys, and they decided they'd try their hand at radio. So Paul Walden, the manager, goes to Hood River and buys KIHR out there. I'm working there at the time, and that's where I got to know him and the little kid guy that hang around with him. Craig, somebody? He started as a janitor at KIHR. Dad didn't believe in free rides. And he went away later to college at Fairbanks, University of Alaska. I was a junior at Fairbanks. And he came back with this great big voice. He has a future in this business. But the other thing that happened when KODL got sold was Les Cunningham was the nighttime disc jockey. And Sterling was going to turn the station into a rock and roll station. He would have none of it. So he put his own on the air. The first FM in the whole area was KCIV FM at 104.5. And CIV, he used to say, stood for the Roman numerals 104 and for civilization, the ultimate hope of mankind. That's the way he signed up. You know? Great. Les lived over there, up off Dalles Mountain Road. He was the only disc jockey. It was his station. He ran it the way he wanted. He played what he wanted when he wanted. You turn on, you might hear show tunes, you might hear like classical, you might hear some jazz, you might hear New Orleans stuff. You just never knew. He was great. And he didn't have a telephone up there. He had electricity. He didn't have water except for a giant tank behind him. He had a tank truck with haul water up to him. His salesperson, Brian Schutz, used to stop by our office and chat on the way up to Kelly Viewpoint, where he'd sit there with his CB radio and radio the sales up to Les up on the hill. And Les would do these amazing commercials. They're supposed to be 30 seconds long, they went about 5 minutes. You know, that really nice guy down there has that shoe store. He is such a guy. And he would talk about his family, how nice he is. Oh, and he's got some new floor shines coming in too. It was great. It was very, very interesting.
What happened to Les?
Well, Les sold the station in 1982, and he's since passed away.
That's awesome.
But he was a great guy and a real pioneer in the radio business.
Was it at Casey too?
I don't know if it was at Casey. I do know when he had been. I came to town in '74. He had already had the station on the air across the way. You know, I think we'll just wrap up there with all the formal stuff and take any of your questions about radio or anything you've got to share. And I see it back there, Michael.
Who stopped the 1936 for KEX and who prevented that from happening?
Well, I think I don't know if the Oregonian bought off the group from Spokane or what. That the only thing was that there was a thing on the radio, the newspaper that said they had this hearing, and that was it. So I don't know ultimately what happened, but I'm assuming that they're here, will give you a few bucks to make it go away. Yes, sir.
I don't understand the procedure where stations move to other towns. Does the license go with the owner wherever he wants to go? Because I'm thinking it mostly it's Q104.
Okay. I knew that one was going to come up. Yeah. Thank you. And in the old days, the FCC assigned stations a spot, and they assigned channels, and each town had so many channels of so many sizes, and there were places for local stations, for regional stations, and for what they call clear channel stations. FM came along later, after World War II primarily, and did the same kind of thing. They had big, small, medium stations, and it used to be you got assigned and that's where you were. Okay, here comes the politics. Deregulation has been a bad thing for radio. And I'll say that because when I started in radio, no matter who you were, no matter how much money you had, you could own 7 AM stations, 7 FM stations, 7 TV stations, and of those 7, only 4 could be major markets. That was it. Over the years, deregulation has become a fad, and by the late 80s, pretty much it was, you can buy as many stations as you could afford. And so big companies like Clear Channel ended up with 1,300 radio stations. Sometimes every radio station was one of them. And then they started looking and saying, how can we make more money? Well, if we own this station here, when we change its frequency down here just a little bit, that'll open up a hole between that and some other station where a new station could go in. We can grab a frequency out here and move it in there. And the FCC has gone along with them, allowing them to move stations from elsewhere into bigger markets where the same signal is worth a whole lot more money because it reaches a whole lot more people. As a matter of fact, Wasco County right now has 3 situations like that. Q104 is supposed to go to Covington, which is a suburb of Seattle. The reason it got held up is that they found a better spot to move it to, but it's being held up because there's a competing application having to do with a Canadian frequency just across the border. It's just going to take about a year for that to be resolved. But that station is a Class C 100,000 watt, as big as you can get, most powerful FM signal available in the Dalles Miles, it's worth a nice piece of money. In Seattle, it's worth 10 to 15 times as much. In southern Wasco County, in Warm Springs, actually, there's another 100,000 watt FM, and then there you'll see in my list, it's the one that has all the different set of call letters. It's probably Laser 96. And it's owned by Verizon Broadcasting. They're planning to move it to, I think it's Forest Grove, Portland, someplace in the suburban Portland metro area, where it will be worth, and I talked to the owner just the other day, and he said it'll be worth like 25 times what it's worth in Warm Springs. So what happens is all the powerful signals get moved into the bigger markets, and it degrades the service to smaller markets. So there's a third one. KIHR FM potentially will move into Portland as well. But that's a complicated deal reported on a couple of years ago that involves 7 different stations swapping in Eugene, in Albany, and creates a new station in Paisley. Paisley, Oregon, population 200, the annual Mosquito Festival is the biggest event. I don't think that station channel will ever go on the air. So. Anyway, that's, without getting a lot of technical detail, it's the FCC's fault. Big money talks and small markets are going to hurt from it. Oh, the other bad thing, go ahead. Yeah.
I just want to make a comment. Years ago in another life, I was a state police officer, and during the summertime, we would just get blared out by Canadian police, and you couldn't talk over them. They were louder than, a block away from our station, and it was terrible interference. And we didn't know if we interfered with them. But one day, I was on the radio waiting for them to stop, and I heard one of these fellows in Canada say, "The bloomin' Yanks are cutting us out again."
One of the things the FCC is supposed to be good at, and perhaps the only thing it does, is very carefully ensure you stake out your territory with that boundary of it's yours and with adjacent frequencies. And that's about all they really do. That's good. They've been working with Canadians and with other adjacent countries. Anybody else? Any questions? Yes?
Well, I love to watch KLCK, across the river.
KLCK in Goldendale,
KLCK in
1400.
Goldendale, and I have to that on every morning, and it's fine. What is it, 1400?
Yeah.
And it's good until about 3 o'clock. And then I have to switch it over to my radio in the bathroom, a Hood River radio, because it's an AM.
Yeah.
And then all those, because you all wavy and then you can't, it doesn't come in clear. How can you make that better with a better antenna or what?
You can, a better antenna would be helpful. I mean, AM radios, if you get the taller your antenna, the better reception you're going to get.
Yeah.
So if you could stick one on the roof and drill a hole, but
Because
you could get better reception.
it's the only station that has like bandstand and that old music that isn't rock and roll, it isn't country and western, what do you call it? But anyway, it goes away, and some days if the weather is bad, you don't get it at all.
That's
And worse, they're crowding in on it.
I'm sorry about the best I can tell you. You may have to move to Goldendale. Oh, okay. All right. Yes, sir.
What's the impact of the satellite radio? And I mean, has it been a good or a bad thing? Or
Satellite radio so far has not, as my understanding, had a huge impact. I think it will down the road. They were doing so poorly that the two satellite companies are now merging because they couldn't survive on their own. They were paying way too much for Howard Stern, for one thing. A $100 million contract. Come on. So down the road that may have a lot more impact. The thing about satellite radio is that you can keep the same station as you drive across the country if you like that type of music, and you don't. Some of them you hear commercials, some of them you don't, depending on which channels it's on. But you don't get anything local, and you don't get any local weather. You don't even get the time because they're doing all the time zones at once. So there are some downsides to the satellite radio. Yes, sir.
When I was a kid, the
seems to me like, I'm talking about the call letter to KGW,
Yeah.
and they had, if I remember right, they had a decal on their ad on an owl, and their call letter would keep growing wiser. Did you go into that? Have you ever heard of that?
Yeah, yeah, they are. And they used to have something called the KODL Club, and it was call letters are fun. And since somebody brought that up, I'll tell you a couple of quick things about it. The examples we have here are pretty boring. KODL, Oregon, DL for Dells, etc. KACI went on the air as KRMW, and everybody called it CrumW. They wanted KRMC for radio in Columbia, but that caller was assigned to a ship at that time. That's why he ended up with KRMW. But some of them can be fun. WIOD in Miami was the Wonderful Isle of Dreams. That's what it stood for. There's a couple of really perfect calls. Waco, 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 Texas. KODY and Cody, Wyoming, close. And there are other fun things that they stood for. Up here is there's a KWRC, which is the station at Barney County where the dad Paul Walden put on the air in Pendleton. And they even underneath it says World's Roundup City. Also stood for Western Radio Corporation, which that was the name of Henry. When KMSW went on the air here in the Dallas Cup about 5 years ago, here's a secret. Which former owner had a wife named Mylene S. Walden? I asked her about that when it happened. She says, yes. Greg was being really cute.
University of Oregon?
Oh, University of Oregon, KWAX, Quacks. Or, WAX from the old Wax Records. So, yeah, fun stuff. Yes?
How about the story of doing a remote from a Lyle telephone?
Oh, Lord. I don't know if I can still recite that one, but early in my career at KODL, they sent me to cover the Lyle Pioneer Days Parade. Now, it's not a large parade. You have to get there early. And we had supposedly made an arrangement with the gas station guy there that I could go. So we had a setup where you could go and unscrew the telephone and plug a couple of wires in, and you could broadcast, call up the station and put the line to a line on the air, and you can just plug your hand in there. Well, I got over there, and the parade was 3/4 finished. We had sold this coverage, by the way, and the door was locked up, and the only thing was a payphone. So I go to the payphone, and I'm wearing my corduroy jacket. It's hot. I'm sweating. Things are slipping. There's a little tiny triangular shelf I'm trying to set this thing on. And I go to unscrew, and of course you can't unscrew the thing on a payphone. And finally I just folded my stuff up, got in the car, and went back and said, the parade was a great parade. We didn't cover it this year. There's a lot more to the story that I've forgotten, but it was a very frustrating experience. So, yes?
Well, I mentioned this earlier to you. My dad was George Telford was a DJ up at KODL. And at home we have some LP records with him doing ads. And I do remember him talking about let's work in there during the Korean War. And you'd have to run and grab the news off the teletype or whatever it was and come back and then try to pronounce the names cold. And he hated that. Do you have any stories?
Vietnam in my case.
Yeah.
I was on the air at KIHR during the early days of the Vietnamese War. I used to sweat. They used to send pronunciation guides over. The Vins and Phenoms and Piens and whatnot, Nians. Finally I realized nobody there knew. I stopped trying to say whatever came out, and nobody ever called me on it. 67, 68. Yes, but that's very true. Yeah.
Do you have any stories on live performance? As a kid, taking music lessons, we appeared at least one time at KODL, playing the accordions, playing whatever.
You know, by the time I got there, I'm sorry to say they were no longer doing it. They'd actually closed up that big room. We opened it up again for a while just because we needed the space, but no, we didn't do live performance. We did some remote broadcasts for people performing. We start when I was there, we switched to country format in 1983 for a lot of years. KODL was country, and we did the Wrangler Country Showdown. We broadcast that live, and that was a lot of fun. Sometimes we did a lot of ball games, and they're all on phone lines and hookups. And I remember frantically having to go down, and somebody had forgotten to hook this up and jiggled all the stuff a time or two, cursing the telephone company as I went. Yeah, that kind of stuff. Oh, well, I got to tell you one more. This is you will never believe this because I was shocked when we did some repairs at KODL. I'd been there a few years already. Had to go up in the attic. Here's this box of old correspondence. In fact, the thing I showed you with KGW and KDX is from that, and I have all that old correspondence. It was fabulous. There was an onion skin script for a program in which the gentleman from the radio station interviewed my grandmother, Rodger Nichols, in the river, talking about her two sons in the war, my dad in the Pacific, and my uncle in Britain, I think, flying bombers into Germany. And it was highly canned. Why, yes, I went back to work in the factory, and we have a victory garden out back, and I get lots for my sons. And it was wonderful. But you could never, a script writer would turn that away as being too coincidental, but it really happened. It really happened. It's a huge trigger. Yes, Andy?
Rolling time back to 1936, in that article that I sent you, I got the impression that because KEX was very popular and came in well here in the Dalles, that the impetus for not having the local radio station came not from the newspaper, but from the local people.
Well, actually...
And I think, what?
Oh, I say actually, because I copied this over yesterday, so I'm pretty quick. Some people, the Ministerial Association had a representative there, spoke in favor of the local station, obviously, and so did the W.S. Nelson of the court, or the chamber. But I think those were the only ones, so they didn't talk about anybody who opposed it.
And one of those articles, and I don't recall, that someone gave testimony as to why the Dalles should not have a radio station, period. Did you?
No, I didn't get that, but I think the Dalles Chronicle the next day took the side of the Oregonians, saying that we're not opposed to a radio station as such, but this is not a good time for this, and it shouldn't be. We don't want, let me see if I can find the quote here, because I did.
What does it say at the bottom there? Maybe that's what I was thinking of.
Okay. Let's see, go back here a ways. Bear with me for a second. No, I don't have the quote with me, but it said something like, we don't want phonograph records to compete with trying to get an important ball game this fall. That was the editorial.
And there were other ones that I remember reading and didn't find for you, that radio would interfere with the dinner hour.
Oh yeah, there were lots of
it's just like it's the same story as the games that the kids play with the
Nintendos, the video games, the internet, the movie theaters, the television. It's all been destroying the American lifestyle. And so far, I guess we're still here. Yes, sir.
I have a question for you. Do you know have any insight into what the future for KODL is? Being the fact that they were moved from up on Radio Way, they lost their tower site. He tried to set a station up downtown, and then he ended up finally installing the transmitter and antenna out of his house. Out here, talking about.
Yeah, and I'm going to walk carefully here.
Well, it was a lot. He was fine and all that.
I'm aware of that, because we have a long history together, and I don't know. I do know, as you say, that he was fined, and that he's got so much time to find another site and get something up, so I hope he does, because it is a valuable service.
He's got a good, there's good programming going on.
He's got a license for 5,000 watts, and he can't be putting more than a couple hundred out there now, and you could use a big signal like that.
Well, I think the legal end of it is, I think the minimum of 1,000 at night and 5 in the day, the FCC takes 20% of the lowest power and then assigns you that under a temporary permit, so you can run 200 watts.
Yeah, that sounds about right. So.
It's a shame, because the station used to cover the area tremendously. Driving up the gorge, you'd hear before you even heard the hooker station.
I was there when we went from 1,000 to 5,000 watts. It was a huge thing for us. We sold it like crazy. Oh, we sold. Short story. We got really excited because one year the Arlington Honkers went to the state championship playoffs in Baker City, and we said, let's carry the game for them. So Rod Runyon and I went up there to Arlington, and we sold the bejesus out of that ball game. We had people calling in the high school, ranchers. Me and the missus would like to buy a sponsorship there. Okay, we'll take it. And we sent Al over to Baker City to do the ball game. And then we realized there were probably only about 4 people in Arlington left to hear the ball game. But we did. They were just delighted. I think they won the game. They were state champs 2 years running, and it's cool. Yeah.
The Sunday program that you fill in for, you said sometime.
Yeah, singer-songwriter and Sunday with Dan Ross.
Isn't that one of the last on-site actually done programs? Isn't most everything now pre-recorded? Or?
Well, most everything comes in by satellite feed on most of that one, and there are a couple of others that show up on. There's a Friday night Spanish language program on KIHR, same station that this was on. And I believe that they're doing Area 54, which was a couple of that guys did for a lot of years, doing kind of bizarre underground kind of stuff for, been on 12 years on 204 now, it's on KCF now. But there aren't a lot of local. Alvin's still doing his coffee break program. I heard on his 7,000 show last year. I was there when it started. It was pretty insane. Over the years, I had a chance to talk to. It's fun to interview a senator and say, "Okay, tell me really." And of course, they dodge and whatnot. But you got it for an hour. Senators and congressmen and some famous folks. And that's kind of fun. Oh. That, if you would take a look at that over there, that is the finals tube from a 1,000 watt transmitter. It came out of KIHR. I was going out to the station one day. It was sitting there at the top of the trash, and I said, let's recycle it. Someday that'll be fun. I think that probably ought to wrap it up there. Get a chance to look at any of the stuff and questions personally. Thank you all.
Thank you, Roger. You don't disappoint us. Come back and do another program, find another topic next year. I want to thank the folks downstairs who prepared the refreshments, and be sure you stay and visit. Dwayne Powell has been recording these each week, and that's part of the project that we are doing instead of doing audio recording where you miss all the visual end of things. We're trying to do audio-visual recording now, and upgrade the equipment so that we don't have to do this last-minute stuff of bringing the equipment in, so everything will work and be set up here. So thank you for coming. We will probably be doing a program again for Historic the Dalles Day in the fall, and then of course next year's History Forum. So any ideas, we welcome them. Thank you for coming.
And now, folks, it's time to say goodnight. Sincerely appreciate your patronage and hope we've succeeded in bringing you an enjoyable evening of entertainment. Please drive home carefully and come back again soon.